1000 is a family of standards relating to risk management, and is brought by International Organization for Standardization. And we have the 2018 version, which is it provides principle. What it just does is provide principle and generic guidelines for managing risks faced in organizations. So that's just what it means. And when we're talking about risks, we're going to have two sides of risks, the positive risks and the negative risks. And we know that the negative risks are the threats, opportunities. And of course, we'll be talking about uncertainties. Most define the definition of risks, which means the lack of knowledge about an event that reduces the evidence in conclusion drawn from data. So risk factors, we're going to look at some risk factors also, probability of risks occurring, how likely an event will occur, the impact of that risk, when it's going to happen, and how often the risks are going to happen when you're carrying out your project. Then definition now, what is risks? We have different definition of risks. In simple terms, we can say risk is a situation involving exposure to danger. It's the combination of the probability of an event and its consequences. We know that every event we carry out has consequences. Every project we carry out has risks. We cannot avoid those risks from coming through, but we have to manage them away. Then risk is the effect of uncertainty in objectives, and an effect is positive or negative. That's, we have the positive side of risks and we have the negative side of risks, and that's what ISO 31000 is saying. We have to consider both the positive and negative side of risks. So the Project Management Book of Knowledge version 6 says individual project risks is uncertain event or condition that, if it occurs, it has positive or negative effect on one or more project objectives. So we're still saying the same thing. The whatever project we're carrying out, we're going to be carrying out has its risks, and those risks can be positive or can be negative, one way or the other. And as we carry out our project, then the overall project risk is the effect of uncertainty on project as a whole, arising from all sources of uncertainty, including individual project risks representing the exposure of stakeholders to the implication of various project outcomes, both positive and negative. So now, what is the importance of risk management? Why do we need to consider risk management? We need to consider it because we have to identify, analyze, and we have to respond to risks throughout the life cycle of the project. Because along the line, when we're carrying out our various tasks, work packages in the various little work packages along the way, along the tasks we carry out, we're going to experience risks one way or the other in our project, and we have to consider them. We have to identify those risks, we have to analyze those risks, and we have to respond to those risks, and we have to mitigate those risks if they are negative risks, to mitigate them so that they don't affect the output of our project. So now risk management is often overlooked most of the time. People like actually in Nigeria, you discover that especially construction projects, you discover there's a construction going on, maybe a building construction, and maybe you have a building construction and the workers over there, they don't have safety helmets, some of them don't have safety boots. You just see people working in high-rising buildings and no safety equipment on, because you discover that most people they don't take into considerations when you have dangers and objects, maybe an object coming from above and hits maybe a construction worker. So, but those are very important issues that has to be considered, especially when you are carrying out construction projects and many other projects like that. If you are carrying out an electrical project, of course, and you are climbing a pole, you have to have your safety gear on to avoid shock and all that. So risk management is very, very important when you're carrying out projects, and even when you're carrying out little projects also. So the type of risks I said earlier on, we have negative and positive risks. Now the negative risks involves you understanding the potential problems that may occur in the project, why and how you can impede those problems. how you can mitigate those negative risks so that they don't affect your project. And then, of course, we have positive risks. Positive risks, they are the good sides. They are actually the opportunities that come when you're carrying out the project. Now, we can say it's an uncertainty that have a negative and positive effect on the meeting. In most cases, the goal of these risks is to minimize the potential negative risks while you maximize the potential positive risks in that project. So now looking at some key concepts, the project risk management processes address both levels of risks. That's both the negative and positive side of risks. And now when we're considering risks in the project, now you're going to have the individual project risks when you're carrying out your various tasks. You know, your project is subdivided into various sub-tasks and work packages. So you're going to be considering the risks in each of the various tasks, the various little life cycles of the project. And you're going to be considering the risks on the overall project itself. And now when we say the individual project risk is an uncertain event and condition that if it occurs, it has a positive and negative side, just as we have earlier on defined. Then the overall project risk is the effect of uncertainty, of course, and it affects the overall project. All right. Then looking at risk threshold, risk threshold simply means the degree of acceptance of variation around the objective, the level of risks that you're going to be facing in your project. Now, moving on to trends and emerging practices. Please, if you can hear me, type 1 in your chat room so that I can be sure that I'm not speaking to myself alone and here you can hear me. Please type 1 in the chat room if you can hear me. All right. All right. Okay. All right. I hope I'm not too fast, but because we have a lot to cover, so I have to move very fast. So now trends and emerging practices in project risk management. Now they include and they are not limited to non-event risks. And non-event risks, it has to do with something that has to do with what has not happened yet, but it may likely happen. And when it happens, it's going to have an effect on your project one way or the other. And under these non-event risks, you have two types of risks, which is the variable risks and the ambiguity risks. Now, the variable risk is uncertainty that exists about some key characteristics of your planned events and activities. Some little effects along the line. So when you're carrying out those little tasks along the project, you're going to have some uncertainty, some things that you're not sure of, come into play. So you have to understand those risks also. Then you're going to also be considering the ambiguity risks, which is the uncertainty risks, the uncertainties that exist about what might happen in future. You understand? Arising from lack of knowledge and understanding. Now, these are the risks that occurs when you don't have proper knowledge of those tasks that you're going to be carrying out in your project. Then you're going to be facing some risks that you don't know of because you don't actually have full knowledge on that event, on that task that you have to carry out on that project. Then moving on, we, of course, under the trends and emerging practices, we're talking on project resilience. Now, when you have those risks, like those emergency risks that emerge from blind spots arising from limitation of our conceptual framework, when you're having some unknown risks that you're not familiar with, you're going to, it will require that you have the right level of budget and schedule contingencies. You have to, when you have risks that just come up on certain risks that you don't expect that just come up, you should have the required budget. You should have enough budget to meet up those risks that will arise. And of course, your schedule should also be, you should have enough timeline within your schedule so that when those risks arise, you don't have to start rushing. You already have it within your schedule to meet up your project tasks, even when those risks arises. Then you have to empower your team also with clear objectives, and you trust that they get the job done. And your team has to agree on frequent. They have to agree upon the limits, and they have to meet frequently, of course, and they have to have inputs also from your stakeholders to clarify those areas also. All right. Then moving on, we're going to consider the emerging trends and practices, the integrated risk management. Now, integrated risk management is just a set of proactive and business-wide practices that contribute to organization security and risk tolerance and profile and strategic decisions. Now, when you talk about integrated risk management, it focuses actually on you are evaluating the risks on a wider context now. And of course, you're going to be collaborating with both your IT team and your business team. It's not just going to be limited to your project team alone. You should have both, you are integrating both your IT team, your business team, your operational team together with your project team to ensure that you manage whatever risks that arises. Then looking at tailoring considerations. Now, tailoring considerations, of course, when you're carrying out this project, risks arises, and you're going to be considering project size. Now, when we say project size, we're considering that does this project size actually, in terms of the budget and the duration, the scope, the team size. Now that's what we're going to be considering. You're looking at your budget, your duration, the duration of the project, the scope, how large your scope you're going to cover in the scope, and the team size, so that you have a proper detail approach on how to manage those risks. So we're going to be considering that. You're going to be looking at your project complexity, because how complex your project is, and the kind of risks that will be involved in your project, and how you're going to manage those risks. We're also going to be looking at the importance of your project. How important is that project to the community? How important is that project to the stakeholders? Looking at the stakeholders' interest also in that project, you have to consider that also, because of course there are going to be risks involved. Some of the stakeholders may not like the risks that are going to be involved in that project. They are going to come out, some consequences that are going to come out by you carrying out that project. They are going to be looking at developmental approach. Now, this is the waterfall project where risk processes can be followed consequently and iteratively. That's developmental approach. Of course, you're going to be having some iterative events along the line, maybe some rolling wave effects. You're going to be considering the risks as you carry out those project activities continuously. So now, moving on, we're going to be looking at now the risk processes. Now, the processes involved in project risk management, and of course, we're going to have first of all, the processes involved. The first one will be you're planning the risk management. The second one, you're identifying your risks. You are performing qualitative risk analysis. You are performing quantitative risk analysis. Then you are planning the risk resources, implementing those risk processes, and monitoring the risks, the risks, of course, that arise from those processes and the responses, of course. Then now looking at planned risk management, what we mean by you planning the risk management now is the process of defining how to conduct risk management activities in the project. That's what you're looking at. You're looking at how to conduct the risk management activities now in the project. How do you conduct those activities? Now, the benefit of this is that it will ensure a degree, a type, and visibility of risk management as appropriate to both the risks, proportionate to both the risks and the importance of the project to the organization or stakeholder. Now, you are defining the degree and type of the risk management processes you're going to be carrying out to ensure that those various risks that will arise from you carrying out that project will be managed effectively, and how it will affect the overall project, and how it will affect the importance of that project also. So, of course, just as we have always been looking at, we're going to have the inputs, tools, and outputs. processes, and you see that most of the processes we have carried out previously are also going to be applying. Of course, we are going to be looking at also our project charter, the project management plan. You're going to be looking at that continuously as you go along the project knowledge areas in order to carry out your risk assessment, of course. You're looking at the shareholders register and all that. The tools and techniques, you're going to be looking at the expert judgment, data analysis, meetings, and of course, the output we expect from this process is the risk management plan. Now, going further, the risks, when we talk about the inputs now, the risk register, we're going to be looking at the link that register contains is the details of project stakeholders and the rules, the project rules and their attitudes towards the overview of their project rules and attitudes towards the risks. How do they respond to the risks that will arise from you carrying out that project? How does your stakeholders arise? The details of all your stakeholders, you're going to consider them in this risks stakeholders register. Now, this is useful because it determines the roles and responsibilities for managing the risks on the project, as well as setting risk threshold also. So yeah, of course, on the tools and techniques, you're going to be carrying out meetings, most basically carrying out meetings to be able to bring out your risk management plan, how you're going to manage those risks. You're going to have project kickoff meetings. You're going to be having specific meetings also. And as you carry out your project and as you come across some risks that may affect the project and even the stakeholders' expectation, you're going to be having meetings continuously. Then, of course, what you are going to be coming out with from those meetings, you're going to be coming out with your risk management plan, of course, which is a plan that documents and the procedures for managing risks throughout the project. You see, that is basically our aim in this process. You are going to be bringing out a document which will include the procedures now for managing the risks throughout that project. The procedures for managing the risks throughout that project. That is the essence why we're going to bring in that. So now, on the output side, of course, just as we have said, you are bringing out those risks. Now, the risks management plan now is going to compose of some activities, some project management activities. Now, the activities that you're going to have now in that risk management plan will be, you're going to have your risk strategy, which will be included in that document, risk strategy, the methodology with which you're going to be using to mitigate those risks, if they're negative risks or positive risks, the rules and responsibilities of stakeholders and every other person involved in the project towards that risks, mitigating those risks, the funding, the tracking, timing, probability, impact matrix, report formatting, risk categories, and stakeholders' risk appetite. So we're going to be looking at some of those things. So these are the variables that you're going to have in that risk management plan. So now, contingency plans are actually, you're going to come across contingency plans. They are predefined actions that your project team will take if an identified risk occurred. You understand? So maybe you are aware that this risk activity is going to occur along the line. So you have contingency plans, of course, to mitigate those risks that may arise. As soon as they arise, your team is able to identify them and mitigate them immediately. So you're going to have fallback plans also. Now, they are developed for risks that have a high impact on meeting project objectives. Those risks that have a very high impact that may affect your overall project, may affect the project negatively, highly negatively. So you're going to have fallback plans, of course, to mitigate those risks. Of course, then you're going to contingency, looking at contingency reserves and allowances. You're going to have some contingencies, of course, when you talk of finance and cost. You set some money aside in case some kind of risks occur along the line. You have enough money to meet up, to mitigate and resolve those problems. If it requires getting more materials or, getting more equipment to mitigate those risks. So a broad category of risks actually a broad category of risks. You have the market risks, you have financial risks, you have technology risks, you have people risks, you have structure and process risks. So you will come across definitely all these risks activities when you are carrying out. Now, when we talk about market risks, you are considering will a new service or a product be useful to the organization or marketable to others? Will your product be marketable to others? Will the users or the stakeholders, will those that you are carrying out that project for, are they going to make use of the deliverable of that project? Are they going to make use of the product? Are they going to make use of those the services you have offered through that project? Are they going to accept it? Is it marketable? Is that project marketable? And when you talk about the financial risks, of course, can the organization afford to undertake that project? Can the organization afford to undertake that project? We talk about technological risks. You are looking at do you have the required technological skills? Do you have the technology to carry out that risks? And even if you have the technology, do you have the manpower that has the required knowledge to operate those equipments that is required to carry out that project? You have to consider that. Then you consider people risks also. Um, do the people do they agree to you carrying out that project? Is it going to be beneficial to them? You understand? You have to consider that also, and of course, the process risks, the degree of change of new projects, the risks also involved. When we are talking about, we're going to be considering what is actually the degree of change of the new project, the degree to bring to that project. The structural risks also, that risks constitute a danger to the community. So we're looking at risk breakdown structure, of course. Risk breakdown structure is actually a hierarchy of potential risk categories on the project. And we are going to look at this risk breakdown structure in detail. Now, when we talk about risk breakdown structure, remember when they were talking about scope, we talk about work breakdown structure. So now, when you're considering risks now, you're going to also consider risk breakdown structure, of course, which is at the output side, of course. And it's just a hierarchy of that represents the potential sources of risks. You understand? It represents the potential sources of risks, where these risks are likely going to come up. And of course, when you look at the diagram here, the risk breakdown structure, you see that the risks can come up at the technical side, or at the external side, the organizational side, or the project management side. And on the technical side, it will come out based on complexity of the project. It can come out on the technological side. We just talk about technological risks. And when you're unable to meet up the requirements, also you will have some risks that may arise from that also, and so on and so on. And of course, the risks may come out when you look at the project management side. The risks may come out when you're estimating, then you're planning, controlling, and of course, in your communication area and various other areas. So we see that. So now the next step now, after you have planned your risk management, you now have to identify the risks that may arise now. Now, when you talk about identifying the risks, you're talking about the process of identifying individual project risks. You understand? You're going to have individual project risks, and of course, you're going to have the overall project risks, of course. But you have to consider those individual project risks along the line and mitigate them so that you can achieve the overall project successfully. So you're identifying the risks that are going to arise, and you're actually documenting the characteristics of those risks that are arising. So that's what we are considering when we talk about identifying risks now, the first step. So the key benefit of this process is that you are documenting existing individual project risks and the sources of the overall project risks. You're going to be considering that you're identifying those risks now. And of course, we have our tools, inputs, tools and techniques and outputs. I'm going to be considering some of that. We have talked about most of the inputs. I'm going to be considering the tools and techniques. And in those tools and techniques, of course, you're going to have expert judgments that are going to be looking into those risks, specialists and experts looking into the risks, identifying those risks, watching out for those risks and ready to being proactive actually, looking to identify those risks, identifying them and documenting them, of course. Then you're going to be brainstorming, you're going to have some brainstorming on how to mitigate those risks. You have a checklist, you identify, you're going to carry out interviews. Your SWOT analysis will come to play here also, looking at your weaknesses, your strengths, and all that. You are going to be looking at root causes analysis. You have to find out the root cause of those risks so that you can effectively mitigate them, of course. You're going to have meetings, of course, which is when basically what you're going to be having to identify those risks. Because if you don't have your meetings, how do you have your team together to identify those risks? Then, of course, you brainstorming. Of course, brainstorming is a technique by which your group attempts to generate ideas. That's your team members now. They tend to generate ideas. They tend to find solutions for specific problems that you're by amassing ideas and spontaneously and without judgment. You're going to be brainstorming. As you're having those meetings is to identify those risks, and you brainstorm on how to get ideas to find solutions to solve those risks. You understand? So, of course, interviewing, is a fact-finding technique for collecting information in face-to-face, phone, email, and instant messaging discussion. So you're going to be having, fact-finding techniques, or employing fact-finding techniques also to find out, to identify those tricks, to mitigate them, to find out solutions also. Then, of course, SWOT analysis, SWOT analysis is you considering your strengths, your weaknesses, opportunities, threats also, which you're going to be using also during risk identification. It helps you actually to identify your risks, then helps to identify a broad range of negative and positive risks that may apply to the project. That's why we need a SWOT analysis. Then, of course, at the output area, what we're going to have at the output area, you're going to have your risk register at the output area when you're identifying those risks. And it's actually a document that contains the results of various risk management processes, and that is often displayed on the table and spreadsheet. We're going to be looking at that actually. We're going to see example of a risk register. And the content of that risk register, what it includes is just a list of identified risks, the potential risks on a risk owner, the potential risk owners, and the list of potential risk responses, of course. And of course, at the output area, you're also going to have your risk report. You're going to have your risk reports, the report on the sources of overall risks together with the summary information. So all those risks that you come across, you have identified, you're also going to document them in your risk report. All right. I hope you understand this. I hope we are getting all what I'm saying. Please, I have to be sure that we are all understanding. If you're understanding what I'm saying, please type yes on the chat room. Type yes on the chat room if you're understanding what I'm saying. Please, somebody is writing on my screen. All right. Okay. Are we understanding what I'm saying? All right. All right. Don't worry. Questions will be asked immediately after the lecture, but you can equally type the question on the chat room also. All right. I may be too fast. Okay, I'll try to slow down a little bit. Okay. All right. All right then. Now, we said at the output side, we're going to be having the risk register, the output, and we're going to be having the risk report. Now, the risk register is going to look like this. I took the liberty of having what you are going to be bringing up now. On your risk register, of course, you're going to be having the number of risks. You're going to having the description of risks and the impact. You can see here, on the example here, you see the competitor may have a new product at the market at the same market target and reduce revenue by 30%. So you see, this is a risk when you have a competitor and who is giving a better offer, especially if your project is a product and you have a competitor who is giving a better offer. Is a risk, of course. You see the date is recorded. You see the probability of occurrence. Is it unlikely? Or is it unlikely or is it likely? You see the severity of the risk. severity is from 1 to 10, rated from 1 to 10. How severe, how sure are you that this risk is going to occur? You see the risk category now. See the risk category. Is it going to be a medium risk or is it going to be a high risk? You see the risk management now, the action which you're going to be taking now, and when, by who is going to be taking the action and when. So we see all that. You can see that. See, somebody is writing on the screen. All right. All right. So I believe we can see this, right? Now you see it gives us, it should give us an understanding of how the risk register should look like. And you see those little. Okay. So now you have identified your risks now. You're going to be going to qualitative analysis. Now, what do we mean by your project risks for further analysis or action by assessing their probability of occurrence and impact as well as other characteristics. Talking about qualitative risk analysis. Now, what it means is that you are prioritizing now. You are listing out your risks according to the priorities now to further analyze them and analyze the probability of their occurrence and the as well as your. I come again. Risk analysis. You are trying to identify it. You are carrying them out. You are taking them now for analysis, trying to assess, are they really going to occur? You understand? Then the project and the very. I hope we understand. All right. Then, of course, we have tools and techniques, and we have the outputs, of course, and we're going to be looking at some of those concepts of doing your qualitative analysis. Efforts on high probability. Now, when you talk about qualitative, managing your risks now, you have identified your risks now. You're analyzing them based on priority now. You're going to be looking at the high probability, the ones with high priority risks, the ones going to affect your project. So you're going to be looking at those ones first before I may not say first actually, but you're going to be looking at them. You're going to mitigate them, consider them as you go along the line. Then you consider the less, the less priority risks facing. Now, performing a qualitative risk analysis establishes the relative priorities of individual project risks for the planned risk responses. Now, please, I hope I know some people may copy all as I'm reading it, but you just make effort to get the materials. If you get the materials, this slide will be part of the materials so that you have them and still go through them. So you don't need to you don't need to be copying everything. You just focus on trying to understand what we're talking about. Now it identifies the risk owners also for each risk. Who will take responsibility. The risk owner are those who will take responsibility for planning an appropriate risk response. Those are the risk owners. They take responsibility for planning the appropriate risk response to ensure that it is implemented. Now, they plan the risk response, how the response to those risks that are arising, and to ensure that those risk responses are implemented to mitigate those risks. Do you understand? So that's what we are looking at. Then, on the tools and techniques, of course, you will be considering the risk data quality assessment. Risk data quality assessment is part of the tools and techniques. Now, what the risk data quality assessment, it evaluates the degree to which the data about an individual project risk is accurate and reliable. Do you understand? I come again. It evaluates the degree to which the data about the project risk is accurate and reliable as a basis for qualitative risk analysis. Now, those risks you have identified now, is it accurate? Is it reliable? You understand? That's what you are talking. Well, that's what we're talking about. We're going to talk about risk data quality and assessment. Those data that you have gotten about those risks that are arising, are they accurate? Are they reliable? You understand? Are you sure about them? Are they really a basis for qualitative risk analysis? You understand? So now, and we're going to be looking at probability assessment also. Now, probability assessment considers the likelihood that the specific risks will occur. You understand? The likelihood that that specific risk that you have identified is going to occur. That's what we mean by probability assessment. You understand? Probability assessment. That's what we mean by probability assessment. You are trying to check, is it true that these risks that I have identified, is it likely going to occur? Some of those specific risks, are they likely going to occur? You're going to be assessing them. You understand? So is part of performing qualitative analysis. I hope we are understanding. Please, are we understanding? Please, if you're understanding, type 11 in the chat room and be sure we're understanding this. Please type 11 in the chat room if we are getting it. All right. All right. All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Okay. So now we talked about, remember we talked about risk assessment matrix. Now this is a sample of a risk assessment matrix. Now, do you understand? This is a sample of a risk assessment matrix. Now that risk assessment matrix, you see that we're going to be having the probabilities. Is how likely are these risks going to be occur? Is it rarely going to occur? Is it unlikely that it will occur? Is it possible that it will occur? Is it likely that it will occur? Is it almost certain that it will occur? You see the way we break it down so that we know which to respond to and which to respond to first in terms of priority. Now, this risk that is going to occur, is it going to be catastrophic? Is it going to be a major risk? Is it going to be a moderate risk? And is it going to be a minor risk or insignificant risk? So you see that we're going to table all this down. You understand? So when you have this risk assessment matrix, now it's going to help you know which of these risk activities to mitigate in terms of priorities. Do you understand this? Can we see this now? You can see what we're talking about now. You see what we're talking about? All right. All right, now, then, of course, in the tools and techniques, you're going to have other assessment criteria, parameters when it comes to risks. The urgency, of course, the urgency of that risk, the period of time within which a response to the risks is to be implemented in order to be effective. You understand? The period of time within which a response to the risks is to be implemented in order to be effective. That's the urgency to which you must respond to that risk. You understand? Now, of course, you're required to attend to high probability risks. You should attend to them in a short period of time. You understand? You should be able to attend to them quickly, most quickly. Proximity now. Proximity is the period of time before the risks might have an impact on one or more of objectives. You understand? High proximity, that's you trying to, be proactive. You are being proactive now. You understand? The period of time before the risks might have an impact on one or more objectives. That's what we mean. You understand? Then when we talk about dormancy is the period of time that may elapse after a risk has occurred before its impact is discovered. You understand? When the risk has already occurred and it might have occurred and you may not feel the impact at that time, but later on you now see the impact of that risk. Now it indicates a short period indicates low dormancy. Now manageability, the ease with which the risk owner or the owning organization can manage the occurrence or impact of a risk. You understand? The ease with which the risk owner, or if it's an organization that owns the risks, the ease with which they can manage the occurrences and the impact of that risk. That's what we mean by manageability. And of course, when we talk about controllability, is actually the degree to which the risk owner, or if it's the organization that owns the risk also, is able to control the risk output, the output of those risks. You understand? Being able to control them. That's what we mean by controllability. So now, at the output, of course, you're going to have your assumption log, your issue log. Assumption log is just a document where you have the assumptions, listed assumptions. That's what it means. You have the issue log, you have a risk register. We just saw a risk register right now. Of course, risk report, coming out with the report of those risks. Now, then, we identified our risks. We perform qualitative risk analysis. We perform that. So now the next thing we're going to do now is to perform quantitative risk analysis. And now when we're talking about quantitative risk analysis now, we're talking of the process of numerically analyzing the combining effect now of identified individual project risks and the sources of uncertainty on the overall project objectives. You understand? We're talking about the process now. You're using numerical analysis now, numerically analyzing the combining effect now of identified individual project risks and other sources of uncertainty on the overall project objectives. Now, the key benefit of this is that it quantifies the overall project risk exposure, and it can also provide additional quantitative risk information to support the risk exposure planning. Now, this process is required for every project. Now, why is it required for every project? Now, it's the only reliable method of assessing the overall project risk through evaluating what aggregated effect on project outcomes of all individual project risks. Now, you discover that when we say quantitative now, we are considering the numerical effect of these risks now. You understand? Considering the numerical effect of this, how it's going to affect the project, in numerical terms. So we are going to be looking. Sorry. All right. Now when you are performing the quantitative risk analysis now, of course we have the inputs, and when we are going to be considering the basis of estimates. That's you see what we're talking about quantitative now, numerically considering estimates. Your cost estimate now will come in, your cost forecasting, your duration estimates now, considering duration now, time duration, considering the cost now. Now you see that we're going to be dealing on figures. That's what we mean by quantitative, and how these risks also will affect all these figures. Do we understand this? All right. Then how the tools and techniques now, of course, we're still going to have expert judgment. We're going to be having meetings also and interviews. You understand? We're going to be having facilitations. You're going to be using your interpersonal skills and team skills also in this area. You understand? And of course, at the output, we're going to have the risk report. Now, what is the difference between your qualitative risk analysis and your quantitative risk analysis? Now, we will talk about the differences now. Now, the qualitative risk analysis, as we have talked about now, it focuses actually, you have identified those risks and you're able to measure the likelihood of specific risk events occurring during the life cycle. And we talked about you now considering those risks based on their priorities. You understand? That's what we talked about there. And we looked at the risks. We saw all the records now. We saw the risk assessment matrix now that now shows you those, explains those qualitative risk analysis. You understand? So now, and when we say quantitative now, it uses variable data to analyze the effect of risks in terms of cost overruns. You understand? In terms of cost overruns and scope creep, resource consumption, and schedule delays. Now, when we talk about cost overruns, now what cost overruns it means is that a cost increase or a budget overrun. That's just what we mean. A cost increase or budget overruns. Now, it may involve unexpected incurred costs. You understand? That's what we mean by cost overrun there. That's when you have a cost increase or a budget overrun. Now it will involve, you now have some unexpected incurred costs. Now, when these costs are in excess of the budget amount due to the underestimation of actual budget, you have underestimated your actual budget, then that's when you now have all these cost overrun. You understand? Mostly during your budgeting. So you see that it has to do with figures. You considering that you have the right figures when you talk about your cost, your budgeting. Then when you see scope creep there, scope creep simply means your requirement creep, or it refers to how a project requirement tends to increase over the project life cycle. You understand? How the project requirements tends to increase over the project life cycle. That's what it means. It's increasing. And you remember you said along the line, sometimes your project sponsor can come along the line. Okay, he wants to add some features to the project. Like if you are dealing with a software project. Oh, okay, I've designed this. Okay, you are designing. Please add this feature, add this other feature to the project. You understand? So if you are adding those features, you are increasing the scope in a way. You understand? So it refers to actually you require a project when you're having an increase over the scope. Refers to how the project requirement tends to increase over the scope. You understand? The scope tends to increase. All right. Now, ultimately, the purpose of the same is the difference is that it takes more scientific or data intensive approach. That is the quantitative risk analysis. It takes more scientific data intensive. It's mostly focused on your data now. You understand? All right. Understand. Then now we plan the risk management, we identify the risks, we carried out qualitative risk analysis, we carried out quantitative risk analysis. Now the next thing we're going to be doing now, we have carried out all the analysis we need to carry out. Now we have to plan the risk response now. We have to plan those risk responses. All right, now planning risk responses is actually the process of developing options. You understand? You are developing options, you are selecting the strategies, and you are agreeing on the actions to address the project risk exposure. I come again. You have to plan planning risk responses, because you're going to have various responses. It's actually a process of developing options. Then you are selecting strategies, and you are agreeing on the actions to address the overall project risks, as well as the threat, the individual project risks, as well as to treat the individual project risks. I hope you understand that. All right, now the key benefit is that you identify the appropriate ways to address the overall risks and the individual risks. You are going to identify the appropriate ways to address both the overall risks and the individual risks that will arise from those sub-tasks you are carrying out along the risks, from those little work packages you are carrying out along the tasks, the various tasks, and that make up the overall project objectives. All right. Now, this process also allocates resources and inserts activities into project documents and the project management plan. You understand? It allocates resources. You understand? Because now, what we are saying now is that you are developing options, you are selecting strategies. Now you are selecting strategies, of course, you have to allocate resources to people who will carry out those strategies. You understand? You have to allocate resources to people who will carry out those strategies after you have developed your responses. All right. Now, effective and appropriate responses can minimize individual threats. When you have effective and appropriate responses, it will minimize the individual threats. It will maximize the individual opportunities and it will reduce overall project risk exposure. You see the advantage of having an effective and appropriate risk response. Now, you're going to have also a structured decision-making technique. You're going to employ that also, which will be used to choose the most appropriate response. I hope you understand that. All right. Now, the risk responses now, of course, when we're looking at the inputs, tools, and techniques, of course, you see that we're going to be looking at lessons learned, of course. If you have done previous projects before and you have come across those risks in those projects, you're going to be looking at lessons learned. We're also going to looking at the project schedule. You see that you're going to look at project schedule again to see that you are going to mitigate those risks within your schedule. You have a schedule, your timeline actually. So you have to ensure that you mitigate those risks in line with your timeline in that project. Of course, you're looking at your resource calendar. You're going to be looking at your risk register and your risk report. You're going to be looking at your stakeholders register. Now, the tools and techniques, of course, to carry out this risk response, we are going to be developing options. You understand? So you're still going to have your meetings. You're going to have your interviews. You're going to have strategies now. You come up with strategies for threats. You come up with strategies for opportunities. Remember, I told you that threats are negative risks, while opportunities are the positive risks. You understand? Then, of course, you're going to have contingency response strategies. You're going to have strategies on the overall projects. You understand? You're going to come up with strategies on that. Then, of course, on the output side, you're going to have when you come out with those strategies and how they're going to affect the project, you're going to have a change request if you have to, make some adjustments to ensure that those risks are responded to accordingly, and to ensure that your project is still in line with the objectives. And of course, you're going to have your project management plan update. You're going to be updating. You see that when we go across all these steps, you see that you are always going to be updating your project management plan. You're always going to be updating your project management plan. All right. So of course we are going to have, of course, tools and techniques. We're still going to have decision making, of course, when you're having those meetings and all that. So of course now at the risk responses now, we're going to be having 4 main responses for negative risks. I remember I told you negative risks and positive risks along the line. Now the negative risk responses we're going to be adopting. So we are likely going to be adopting for negative risks. We may adopt risk avoidance, risk transference, risk mitigation, and risk acceptance. Now, when we talk about risk avoidance, now we're going to be sorry. Okay. Sorry, can we take just a minute break? Just 1 minute break. Just 1 minute, 1 minute break. Stretch up, stretch up, stretch up. 1 minute break. Okay, let's just make it 2 minutes. 2 minutes break, please. 2 minutes break, straight up. And if there's an announcement from the coordinator, he will likely give the announcement. Just 2 minutes break, please. Thank you very much. All right, I believe we should be back now. Please, are you with me? And can you hear me? If you can hear me, please just type 1 in the chat room. If you can hear me, type 1 in the chat room so that we'll continue with the lecture. I think this is 7:01. We'll try as much as possible to move on. All right. All right, thank you very much. Now, we said there are 4 main responses, strategies for negative risks. Now, when we talk about the negative risks, you may decide to avoid the risks. That's a response, actually. You may decide to avoid the risks. That's a response. You may decide to transfer the risks. That's a response. You may decide to mitigate that risk. That's also a response. And you may decide to accept that risk and work on mitigating it. That is also a response. So you see that those are the 4 major, responses when you're dealing with negative risks. So now, looking at, of course, we're still going to be talking about that. The strategies now for threats, and we, of course, say threats are negative risks that you come across. And when we talk about escalation, when a project team or a project sponsor agree that the threat is outside the scope, you understand? So when the threat is outside the scope, that means that threat has escalated, you understand? Or that the proposed response will exceed the project manager's authority. Now, there's escalated risks are managed at the program level, portfolio level, or other relevant parts of the organization, and not on the project level. Now, you are carrying out a project, most really large projects. You discover that you have some risks that are beyond your project scope. You understand? Now, those risks, when they are beyond your project scope, you just refer them. Those risk levels will be they will have to be attended by either the management level, the project level, or the portfolio level. You remember when we were defining the program, the portfolio, and we talked about at the program level you have projects level under the program level. You have portfolio and you have on the portfolio level you have projects under the program level. You have programs under the portfolio level, if you can remember. So once a risk is beyond your scope, that's escalated, the higher levels now we have to attend to those risks and may not be attended to by you because it's beyond your scope. All right. Then avoid now we talked about the responding, and we talked about your risk avoidance as an option. You want to avoid risk avoidance is when a project team acts to eliminate the threat or protect the threat. You may want to avoid it. It's an action, it's a response. Then transference involves shifting ownership of threat. You are shifting ownership. Maybe you don't want to take responsibility for that risk. You're now shifting it maybe to another department or what have or maybe shifting to another department or third party to manage that risk and bear the impact of that risk. All right, then talk about mitigation, of course, which is actually you are taking action now to reduce the probability of occurrence. You understand? To reduce the probability of occurrence. That's why you are mitigating. Then risk acceptance, of course, you are acknowledging the existing threat, but no proactive action. You are just acknowledging that yes, this threat is existing. All right. Now the response now for positive risks. The positive risks you have your response, your likely response for positive risks is you likely have risk exploitation. You want to exploit it because actually the positive risk is actually an opportunity. So you likely want to exploit those risks. Like when we talk about risks, when we talk about our normal day life now, you discover that you will tend to take some risks in life. When you say that risk, you taking that risk is going to be very beneficial to you. You want to take that risk. Like when you see all these people that do all these bets, Nigerian, what have you, it's not that they are taking risks actually, but to them it's a positive risk because they feel that if I can just take that risk of, letting my little 100 naira or whatever amount, I will win so and so. So it's a positive risk. So is exploiting that risk. So along the line, when you're carrying out your projects, when you experience those positive risks, you will likely want to exploit them. You understand? You likely want to exploit them. So, and another option you want to take when responding to positive risks, you likely want to share those risks. You understand? likely want to share the risks. And of course, your risk enhancement, you want to enhance the risks, you want to further, exploit those risks. You understand? And of course, you likely accept those risks. All right. Then now, that's what we just talked about actually right now. Exploiting, you know, exploiting, yeah, selecting the high priority opportunities where the organizations wants to ensure the opportunities is realized. You are sharing, which involves you are transferring ownership of the opportunity to a third party. You understand? Because of course, when you share it, you have some benefits that will occur. You understand? Then of course, you're increasing the probability or the impact of the opportunity. You understand? All right. Then of course, you accept the risk, you're acknowledging uh, its existence. All right. All right. Then um, strategies for the overall project reach now. The strategies for the overall project, you see that they are not actually different from the concepts we have discussed. The strategies are just the concepts we have discussed. We are going to have, the overall project is of course going to have both the positive and the negative risks. So you're going to be considering those strategies. They are the risk avoidance, risk exploitation, risk transfer, risk sharing, mitigation, enhancing, and acceptance. You understand? All right. Now, of course, residual secondary risks. Residual risks are risks that remain after all the risk response strategies have been implemented. Now, you may not be able to to mitigate all the risks, but you may be able to minimize most of those risks. You understand? So that's why those risks that you're not able to completely eradicate, those are called residual risks. Now, the secondary risks are a direct result of implementing a risk response. Now, you may implement a response now that will now bring about a secondary risk. It will now bring about, so you're trying to mitigate your response to it now. Maybe it's a wrong response. Now brings up a maybe by secondary risk. Of course, a general risk mitigation strategy for technical cost and schedule risks. Now, of course, you're going to have risks that will arise in your technical side, risks that will arise at the cost when you're carrying out cost, risks that will arise at your schedule. Now, risks, you understand, that will arise from these areas, your technical area, your cost area, and your schedule area. How do we mitigate them? You understand? So now on the technical side, you can mitigate them by emphasizing the team support. You understand? Because technically, you are dealing with your team now. It's your team that carries out your technical activities in the project. So you have to emphasize team support. And that's people working alone, group working alone. Everybody has to work in synergy. Everybody has to work together to actualize that project. Teamwork. You have to emphasize teamwork when you're dealing on technical risks. Teamwork, very important. I hope you understand. So again, of course, you're going to have an increased project manager authority. Your authority as project manager it has to be high in this area to ensure that the project is carried out by your project team. You ensure that you supervise to ensure that the project is carried out because you're going to be supervising when you're having technical risks. Very important. Then you're going to improve problem handling and communication. When you're dealing with projects, technical risks, you need to have an improved problem handling and communication. You have to have serious communication, especially when you're dealing with technical risks. You ensure that the communication is seamless so that when those risks are coming up, you're getting them and you're supervising and all that. You understand? Then, of course, there's going to be an increased frequency of project monitoring, just like I said, supervision. You are monitoring those projects. Then, along the line, also, you're going to use your work breakdown structure and your critical path method also in solving those this thing. Your work breakdown structure and your critical path method. I think when we get to the calculation side in subsequent lectures, we're going to do some calculations on critical path method. You're going to see how you're going to apply critical path method in that instant. Now that we have talked about technical and how you are going to mitigate those technical risks. Now, moving on cost risks now. You're having cost risks that are rising based on your cost. Now, what you're going to do now is to increase the frequency of project monitoring, of course, to ensure that those resources that are being used in the project are used judiciously. There's no waste. Because when you're carrying out the project and somebody, your project team or your staff is misusing those materials that are needed for the project, of course, it will affect your cost and you end up spending more. You now discover you have shortage of materials, which shouldn't be. You understand? And of course, if you have surplus materials, it's also going to be waste because you have spent more money. You understand? So you're going to increase the frequency of monitoring. You understand? Actually supervising to see that those materials you have provided for carrying out that project are judiciously used and not being wasted. You understand? And of course, you're going to also look at your work breakdown structure in this area also and your critical path method. You're going to improve communication. You understand? Project goals, understanding, and team support. You're still going to work with your team. It's going to carry out team support. That's work as a team here. Ensure that your project team is working in synergy to ensure that these risks that arise, these risks that are arising from the cost are being, mitigated, and the response is being, in line to mitigate waste along the line. Now, of course, you're going to increase project manager's authority. Of course, your authority as a project manager is going to be also high in this area to ensure that the cost is being managed. You don't go and buy materials that are outside the scope of that project. You understand this? All right, now when you now talk about schedule risks, that's your timeline now. Risks that are arising based on your schedule. How do you mitigate those risks now? Of course, you have to monitor. You ensure that you have a timeline for each task along the project line. So you have to monitor that every team member or project staff carry out their tasks according to the schedule. You understand? So that schedule is being met. Because if you don't monitor the staffs that are carrying out each of those tasks, you're going to have a situation where you have not met up the deliverable of that task according to the schedule, according to the timeline, and you now have to start crashing your schedule, which will be very bad for you. You understand? So you have to monitor. You understand? Then, of course, you also have to look at your work breakdown. You see that the work breakdown structure is very, very important. And when you are also looking at risk mitigation, then you have to select the most experienced project manager, of course. Select the most experienced project manager to ensure that he is monitoring and checking to see that these project schedule is being followed and is being carried out according to the scope and the specification of that project. You understand? So I believe we understand. All right. Thank you very much. And so now we planned the risk responses, right? We have carried out the plans. Now we have to implement those plans that we have carried out. We have developed. We have to carry out to implement those risk responses. Now, when we're implementing those responses, you are implementing the agreed upon risk response plan. You understand? All those responses that we have agreed that, okay, this will be our response to this risk. This will be our response to that risk. This will be our response to this risk. Now, we are going to implement it. That is what we mean now by implementing it. You see how the steps are going, right? You understand? So if you follow these steps, of course, you're going to achieve great success in managing your risks that arises in the project. So, of course, implementing those risks, you have risks, you have your inputs, tools, and techniques and outputs. And of course, of the inputs I told you, you will always be looking at your risk management plan. You look at your risk you look at your project management plan. You look at lessons learned, risk register, risk reports. You understand? So tools and techniques, of course, you still have your expert judgment. You have interpersonal skills coming to play here when it comes to implementing. Interpersonal skills have to come to play here. And of course, you also implement your tool, your software tool, your project management tool here also. And the output, of course, we're gonna be updating those documents, those are rich registers and all that. You understand? And the lessons learned register, rich report, we're gonna be updating them frequently as we implement these responses. I hope you understand. Okay, please, I hope I'm not too fast. If I'm not too fast, please type no in the chat room. If I'm not too fast, type no. If I'm too fast, type yes. If I'm not too fast, type no. Okay. All right. All right. All right. All right. We are almost done, actually. All right. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. All right. Now, of course, at the tools and techniques, we talked about uh, expert judgment, of course, because the expert will consider the individual, will validate and modify the risk response if necessary. You understand? That's the essence of just the experts you're bringing in to carry out expert judgment, just to validate and to modify the risk response if it is necessary, and decide on how to implement them in the most efficient and effective manner. I hope you understand. You know, so that's the essence of bringing in an expert to do an expert judgment, just to validate, to modify and the risk response, and to ensure that this risk response, is carried out to give out the most effective is carried out in the most effective and efficient manner. All right. Then the after we have implemented those risks now, those risk responses now, the next thing that we do is to monitor. You understand? So it's not enough to just you implement the responses. You have to monitor to see the effect of your responses, of you implementing that response. Remember, we talked about secondary risks. Now, if your responses affects your project negatively, you're going to have a secondary risk. You understand? So that is why you need to monitor the responses. Do you understand? That is why you need to now monitor those responses. You understand? You need to monitor those responses to see, okay, these risk response plan that I've implemented, how is it affecting the project right now? Is it reducing the risks and ensuring success? Sorry, and ensuring success, a successful run of the project. That is why you need to monitor that. Now, risks, to monitor risks is a process of monitoring the implementation of the agreed upon risk response plan. You understand? We developed a response plan after we have identified those risks and we have considered the qualitative and the quantitative analysis. We now plan the risk response. You understand? So we are now looking at those agreed upon plans now. You understand? Then we are tracking the identified risks. Then we are analyzing those things now, monitoring the effect now of the implementation of those risk response. Do you understand? Now, evaluating the risk process effectiveness throughout the project. Now, that process that we're implementing now, how is it affecting the project? Just as I was rightly said. All right, now, the key benefit of this is that it enables project decision to be based on current information about the overall project risk exposure and individual project risks. I come again. The benefit of this process is that it enables the project decision to be based on current information about the overall project risk exposure and individual risks. You understand? Because you have to analyze the current information, the current status of the project after you have implemented those risk responses. You have to monitor and see, okay, now what is the effect of those responses? Now, what is the current status now? You understand? All right. Then on the monitor risks, of course, we have our inputs, tools and techniques, and outputs. Of course, I told you, always be looking at our project management plan continuously. Then on the tools and techniques, you're going for the monitoring, you're going to be having data analysis, technical performance analysis, audits. Of course, you're going to be having a lot of meetings. Your meetings is to review. You understand? Those meetings are to review and go through. Okay, these responses that we have implemented, how is it affecting the project? You're going to be looking at those things. Then, of course, the output will now be the work performance information. Now, what is now the performance now after we have mitigated those risks? You understand? So, risk monitoring and control, of course, involves executing risk management processes to respond to risk events. Okay. Now, of course, in tools and techniques, we have weeks workarounds. Now, what that means is that they are unplanned responses to risk events that must be done when there is no contingency plan. That's what we mean by workarounds. When you have unplanned responses to risk events that must be done when you have no contingency plan, you did not make contingency for that risk. Maybe that risk is not in your risk register, and you are not aware that that risk will come up, and it just came up, like that. So you have to do some workarounds. That's unplanned responses. That's what it means. All right. Now, the main output of risk monitoring and control are, of course, we have to look at the requested changes, of course, after you have implemented those responses. Recommended corrective and preventive actions, then updates to risk register, project management plan, and organizational process assets. All right. Now, when you are monitoring responses now, the monitoring response process uses performance information generated during the project execution to determine if, now, I come again, the monitor risk processes uses performance information now. The performance information now that we talked about, is an output. It uses that performance information now to generate, to determine if the implemented risk response is effective. You understand? The output side of monitoring response, one of the output side is performance information. You are reviewing the performance information. Now, you are reviewing it to determine what? If your implemented risk now is effective, that it's really mitigating that risk, it's really reducing the risk, especially if it's a negative risk. Now, and you're also trying to determine if the level of the overall project risk has changed. You understand? If you have actually reduced the risks on the overall project itself. You understand? All right. Then, and you're also trying to determine if the status of the identified individual project risk has changed. You understand? If your mitigation actions, your response, your risk responses has really changed, has really identified the individual risk and has changed the status of that risk, has reduced it. Maybe it has taken it from a critical stage to a very minimal level. You understand? Then, of course, it's also going to determine if the risk management approach is still appropriate. If that risk response approach is effective, is it appropriate for that risk management plan? All right. Then, of course, it also determine your project assumptions, if those assumptions are still valid, because of course you're going to be making some assumptions when you're trying to mitigate those policies or those are being followed. It's also going to determine if the contingency reserves for cost and schedule requirements modification. You understand? You're going to create time. You're not going to say, okay, this project is going to carry out in 7 days. I can achieve this project in 7 days. You don't put 7 days. You can put 9 days or 10 days to give allowance, so that you see that when this get those reached before the deadline of that schedule. You understand? All right. Then project strategy. Then now we things we have talked about. You understand? We have talked about from identifying the risks, from carrying out quantitative analysis and all that. You now see how they come to play now when we are now generating our report. You understand? We're having a report, and you can see that so you can see that the project title, you have project title, of course. On this, you have the project pin. If it has a number, the date, the project manager's name, your telephone number. Then you see on the table, you see that you have a comprehensive risk management plan. And you have under the risk identification, is the risk. The risk is not currently a high priority risk. That's why it is dormant. It has the status of risk that you have identified. Is it retired? That's no longer a threat to the project. That's what I mean by retired. Then under the ID, of course, you have the ID. You label those risks according to various serial numbers, IDs. Then you have the date identified project phase, the date you identify those risks. You have the risk event. Now, the risk event here talks about the event, how the threats and the opportunities. Is it a positive risk or is it a negative risk? You understand? Then you have a smart column, of course. A smart column just has a detailed description of the risks. So you have a detailed description now of the risks. You understand? The risk event column is where you identify, you table the risks. You identify the risks. The smart column where you now describe those risks now. Now you describe them based on the specification, the attributes especially, and their relevance and the time bound. You understand? Then when you talk, you now see risk trigger there. Now the triggers are actually indicators. They are indications that a risk has occurred or is about to occur. You understand? So it's just an indication if the risk is about to occur or it has already occurred. You understand? Then it's used to determine when to implement the risk response. That's the risk trigger. You understand? So when you go to the impact area now, the impact of that risk, you see, then the affected level, which your work breakdown structure will be modified as part of the response strategy. We know when we looked about risk breakdown structure, you understand? So you see the affected level, you're going to have the affected level. And the quantitative analysis, you see what we're going to have in the column here. For the quantitative risk analysis, it's a wide template actually. So for the quantitative risk analysis, you can see that you consider probability. You know, remember we talked about the checking the likelihood and the high probability of that risk, considering that we're talking about qualitative, sorry. Then the impact, of course, of that risk, you're going to state it down. Then the risk matrix, of course. Remember we looked, the risk matrix, is it a high, is it a substantial, it's going to have a substantial impact on the cost and schedule and the technical side of your project, or is it going to have a minimal impact? You understand? Then, of course, you identify the risk owner. The risk owner is the person who actually, or the office who is responsible for managing those risks. You understand? Then, of course, when we now talk about risk responses now, responding to those risks, you see the strategy now. You're going to table out the strategy with which you're going to use now for mitigating those risks. Then you're going to spell out, you're going to describe the actions to be taken as your risk strategy. You're going to spell it out. You can see, you see how it is. And of course, monitoring and control is the last one, because you're going to monitor those responses now that you have carried out. I hope you understand all this. You see the dates, the status, the review, comment, status interval, milestone check. You understand? All right. All these, when you have the slides, you can still go through them and be able to understand them. Then, of course, we are through and we're going to summarize what we were talking about. Of course, project risk management is an act science of identifying and analyzing, responding to risks throughout the life cycle of the project. As you can see, as we have explained all through the project, and it's the best interest, and it's in the best interest, of course, meeting the objectives. We talked about what the planning stage, risk management plan, you identify the risks, qualitative risks analysis, the quantitative, and the risk response planning. Of course, you plan the risks, you implement the risks, and you monitor the risks. Now, I just have a few questions for us, and if we can answer this and true. Now, question one is the dash details. I ran out of space, but we are already through with the lecture. I hope we enjoy this lecture. I hope you enjoy this lecture. All right. I hope we enjoyed this lecture. That will be our lecture. Thank you for listening. I hope I've been able to convince you and not confuse you, because some of these are a little bit technical, but I believe you'll be able to understand. So thank you very much for listening to the lecture. I hand over to my coordinator, Dr. Eburiche Bandito, sorry. All right, sir. Dr. Sir, over to you, sir.
All right, good morning. And what a wonderful section there. It has been awesome. That has been a great time. Thank you, and thank you to everyone. I don't know if there are questions. Please, if there are questions, can we quickly take the questions now? Or we'll make announcements, then take attendance, and then we'll move on to the next one. Please, if there are questions, kindly raise your hand, and I will be unmuting us for questions. Okay. All right, so we have Trustlin. Please, Trustlin, kindly unmute and let's hear from you.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, ma.
Okay. I came late to the class, but I got to the point where Engineer Abraham was talking about risk sharing.
Okay.
And I was very interested. I'm going to talk about it on financial aspects, like the bank aspects. Okay. I just finished one exam just on Wednesday, and there was a scenario that was painted in one of the questions, which by the time most of us came out, we started discussing it. And it's about risk sharing. That the bank gave a loan to a keke man.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
To buy a new keke, but the bank bought that keke in the bank's name, not in the keke man's name. So the keke man now had an accident where that keke was burnt beyond repair, and he was even hospitalized. Now, the question was, where did the bank go wrong? Because the bank couldn't get their money. They didn't even know where the keke man was. What would they have done? Why did they did they have to buy the keke in their name? That is risk sharing. They would have bought the keke in the man's name and insured it.
Yes, you're right.
Yes, they would have insured it. If they had insured it, yes, the insurance company would have paid at least part of it. There would have been a sharing thing. And you find out that most of the things we do in the microfinance banks, we finance projects, we finance equipment, we buy equipment for people in our name. So it was an eye-opener, yes, that in fact, all these things we have been talking about, we need to share risk. You don't buy it in your name. What if the keke man dies, or even if he did not die? The keke was not bought in his name. It was bought in the bank's name. And there was no evidence. The evidence that was just there is that, yes, we gave this man loan. But the keke itself was bought in the bank's name. So when he was talking about risk sharing, I now remembered it that, yes, I need to share it. I need to share it that, in fact, in most of the things we do in companies, that we need to weigh our risk. So that when these risk events and risk drivers comes, we will know that, yes, we will not bear the brunt on our own, that we need to share this risk so that every other person can bear from it. That's what I want to share.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay, so I have Ridwan. Ridwan, kindly unmute and let's hear from you.
Yeah, good morning, sir. Thank you for your lesson. Yeah, I want to ask a question. On that risk sharing as well. I'm doing a project for a bank as well, be community like CSR. So they paid to my company account, right? But the cost of the goods about a weeks ago inflated.
Mm.
Now, in this case, and we've already signed, they've already given agreements of which I've signed. So in that case, it's a community, it's a CSR to
Mm.
communities. I didn't even take it as contract because I see it as community responsibility service. So now, in that case, who is going to and the challenges at hand now is that I won't be able to buy the quantity we agreed upon because of the market increase. No,
Yeah.
now how I'm going to handle the situation, and I didn't take it as contract because I'm partnering with them on community services responsibilities, not on profit making. So
Mm.
am I going to handle the situation?
Okay. Thank you
Okay.
so much.
All right. I think Mr. Benito will answer, but before then, let me say something. It actually means that you didn't have a contingency plan when it comes to cost when you are, carrying out the budget of that project. And
Yeah,
again, I also want to ask, who are the stakeholders, or who are? I'm sure you're not the only one carrying out that project. Who are those involved with you in that project? Do
yes,
you have some people
myself,
involved?
I'm a member of the CDA as well. So and
Okay.
then CDA committee. So I'm much more in project than others. So actually,
Okay.
I put the contingency, but it was not as much. So the issue we have is that the thing were outweigh because even with Yoruba boys, all those things. So they just came out unexpectedly. I mean, I know I even put them, but they it's
That
beyond
means you
our
did
scope.
not, initially, you did not consider all the stakeholders. That's what it means. Some of those stakeholders, you did not really, get all of them together. It was when you were now
Okay.
implementing now, all these issues now came up, right?
Yes, 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 yes.
Okay. No, now what it means is that because you say you're doing it for a bank and they have already approved and all that, you cannot really go back to them right now because
Yes,
it's
I
already too
can.
late for that. It's too late for that. So you and your team now has to share that responsibility. Actually, you have to share that
Okay.
risk. You have to share that responsibility. I don't know if Dr. Bonito, I don't know if you have a contrary
Okay.
answer.
Thank you so much
Mm.
for that answer. Well, now the next class we are going to be dealing with is on procurement management. And under procurement management, we'll be looking at contracts and different types of contracts and all of that. And
Okay.
I'm going to take us back. Thank God you've been able to identify some key aspects as regarding to stakeholders that were not well identified. So it made the management of the stakeholders not that effective. Then you've also been able to identify the fact that, okay, the groups, the people that are handling the contract should be able to bear the risk. If the contract was signed on lump sum, then you cannot
Yes.
go back to the bank. If it's signed on lump sum, you can't go back to the bank. Okay,
Mm.
but in cost management too, there is what we call funding limit reconciliation.
Pardon?
And there's what we call funding limit reconciliation.
Okay, foreign limits.
Yes,
Okay.
in cost management, if you check your cost management, you see it there. And then we under contract, we also have what we call fixed price economic price adjustment contracts, FPEPA, fixed price economic price adjustment contracts. So if you're running a contract, especially in places like Africa, that things can change in a twinkle of an eye, it's better you take FPEPA contracts than take firm fixed price contracts. When you take firm fixed price contracts and you're paid on lump sum, you can't go back, you can't reconcile again. But if you're taking FPEPA, that's a fixed price economic price adjustment, where there are inflections in the price within the limits or within the time schedule of the contract, you can go back to the contractee to ask for reconciliation. You can go and ask for reconciliation. So in further, and another key word you mentioned is that you didn't take it as contract since it was a CSR.
Yes.
For the bank obviously took it as a contract.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so you are the one that is going to bear the cost anyway, because you didn't apply project management practices to it. First, you would have negotiated on the contract terms, and secondly, you would have identified all your stakeholders involved. Thirdly, you would have also made prospects of the risks like this economic price adjustment that is coming up now. You'd have also included all those things, then negotiated with the bank. If this risk come up, what shall we do? Okay, that would have been well settled from the negotiation table than now. Okay, at this point, like I said, if it is firm fixed price contract, there is nothing they will do. And if you don't deliver, they can call police on you. If care is not taken, they will put you with SARS. All right, thank you so much. I trust that.
Thank you.
But we are going to be looking at contract management in the afternoon. So that will help us also to understand different kinds of contract and which one to go by. Go with part-time, and how to draft out the contract terms and conditions to avoid our contracts being the access to the risks we are trying to avoid. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Right. Thank you so much. Okay, so I have Ehizoje. Ehizoje, please, you can go ahead and unmute yourself, and let's hear from you. Ehizoje. Please, Abubakar, I would also like you to ask your question by raising your hand. You asked the question in the chat room. Please, I would like you to ask your question by raising your hand. Abubakar. All right, please go ahead.
Good morning, sirs.
Good morning, ma.
Good morning.
All right, sir. Please, I wanted to ask, using the qualitative and quantitative aspects of the risk management, what are the tools we use for qualitative, and what are the tools we use for quantitative? Because I know in quantitative, since it has to do with numbers, we certainly apply some statistical formulas. So what are the tools that they use? That's my question, sir.
Okay, sir. Okay, thank you.
Okay, the qualitative risk analysis, if you attend the class, you remember what we are trying to do there is to just identify if these risks are the severity of the risks. That's just what we're identifying there. And you're going to use the risk assessment matrix. That's what we are going to be considering there most of the time. And if you remember, I displayed a table where you have the risk assessment, where you're going to be once you have identified those risks, you're going to identify those risks based on their severity. That's how rarely do they occur, how likely do they occur. Those are the variables we are considering. How rarely do they occur, how likely they occur, how possible, and how extreme, how catastrophic is that risk? You know, is it a major risk? Is it a moderate risk? Or is it going to be an insignificant risk? That's just what we are talking about in qualitative risks. Those are just the various variables we are considering in qualitative risks. I hope you understand, please.
Okay, so Ehizoje, did you get that?
It's like she has.
Ehizoje, did you go home?
It's like she has gone home, but I hope she gets it.
Okay, so importantly, we have the risk assessment. Matrix. We also have other tools there. The risk assessment matrix is actually a general tool we use in project management. But
yes, sir, I got that. Okay, I got that, sir. But for that, for the quantitative, what about the quantitative?
Yes, that's what I'm talking about now.
Okay,
now,
sir.
If you go to quantitative mostly is about decision making. So you have things like the Delphi decision making approach. You have things like the SWOT analysis that can also help you in decision making. Then you have the decision tree. You have 3-point estimate. I'm sure all of those things were listed in under the tools and techniques when we were talking about this. So you can use any of these, and also you can find the ones that are much more customizable to what your organization does. See, so is it decision tree or making approach, or decision tree analysis? Is it SWOT analysis? Is it Swift analysis? Is it Delphi decision making? Are you going to use a sparse judgment and all of that? So all of this can be tools for the quantitative approach. While the qualitative approach, you can use more of the risk matrix table, okay, or risk assessment matrix rather. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so we have Mr. Chizo. Please, Mr. Chizo, can you go ahead and ask your question?
Thank you very much. Are you hearing me?
Yes, we can hear you, sir.
Yes, we can.
Okay, very nice presentation. I think that within the project management practice, I think we should pay a lot of attention to risk management.
That's right.
Because my experience shows that improper risk planning has actually endangered a lot of projects.
Very
and
true.
It doesn't really matter
Yes.
whether the project is small or big, because anything can go wrong. Anything can go wrong. Now, my question is, in considering risk planning, where do we place political risk management, political risk in a project? If you are managing a project, where do we place political risk assessment?
Okay.
Hello, did you hear me?
Thank you so much for that question. Please, yes, we can hear you loud and clear. Just keep your mic open so that you can confirm whether the answer is okay with you or not. And please, all these people asking questions in the chat room, there are so many questions coming in the chat room. If you don't mind, can you just raise your hand so that we'll take all these questions? Because as the questions are coming, they are rolling over each other. If you don't mind, you can just raise your hand and we'll take all the questions. We'll have all the time for questions today. All right, please, Mr. Abraham, over to you. Political risk management, where do we place it under risk planning?
I think we place it at the input. That's where we place it. We place political risk management at the input. You know, when we are considering enterprise environment factors that are outside your organization, you have to consider that also. So it's actually at the input level. You have to consider it when you are doing your risk management planning, so that you don't carry out a risk management plan that is against the government policy, against political policies. You know, most of these policies are government policies. You have to work out your risk management plan in line with those policies. So it is carried out at the input side. Those are the things you first of all consider. You understand? All right.
All right. So, Mr. Chizo.
Yeah, wonderful. Great.
Okay. So, political risk management is part of the enterprise environmental factors that can affect your project. So you identified that in the input session while planning. All right, thank you so much. So we have Uti Addison. Please, Mr. Uti, can you please unmute and let's hear from you.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir. You're welcome.
Thank you, sir. My question is, what are the rules of risk taking?
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you so much. So
the
please.
The rules.
He said the rules of risk taking.
Yes, sir.
Well, the rules are you are the one carrying out the risk response, right?
Yes, sir.
So you are going to generate the guidelines for your response. You understand? You and your project team are going to generate the guidelines for your response. So you're actually the one setting the rules. You understand? Although considering other factors involved, so that those rules you are carrying out doesn't affect your overall project, the output of that project. So those rules, you are going to work it out. You're going to work it out with your team. Okay, these are the guidelines on which we will use to carry out our responses. Do you understand?
Yes, sir.
All right. So it's actually between you and your team going to generate those rules. So you ensure that you are in line with the scope, and it's not outside the scope and all that, and it doesn't affect the overall project. I hope we get that. I think, Doctor, do you have any contrary?
No. Contrary, how will I have contrary? Okay. The only thing I can add is, like he said, you're the one bearing the risk. So, and if you notice all through this class, he kept mentioning positive and negative risks.
Yes, sir.
Of course, so your rules should be based on, number one, what are the impacts of the risks, that positive or negative? Then if you also notice, he talked about risk urgency. Okay, he talked about risk urgency. So based on the urgency of the risk also, you should be able to take your, make your decision on what to do. Then another important aspect is on the appetite of your team to take risk. Okay, what is the risk appetite? If you're going to do more of risk sharing, where insurance is going to be involved, then you will find out that the rule of risk management will be more of what they call it now, sharing, rather than acceptance of risk. Okay, so you look at the impact of the risk, positive and negative side, look at the urgencies involved in the risk, look at the appetite, your risk, your team's risk appetite. So those things will help you in deciding how you're going to formulate the approaches you're going to use in managing your risk. Okay, I think that will help.
Yes, sir.
Right,
thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, please, there are so many questions in the chat room. We appreciate if those hands are raised up, then we answer those questions. There is one question I saw from Abu Bakr, but so many other questions have come on top of it, so I may not be able to get that now. Okay, so I think I'm seeing. Okay, he said something like, if the risk is due to force majeure affecting the schedule, who bear the cost? If the risk is due to force majeure affecting the schedule, who bear the cost? Okay, so Mr. AB.
When he's talking about force majeure, what does he mean by force majeure?
Force majeure are like emergencies like war, strike, fight, unplanned crises, not caused by the project manager, not caused by the project contractee.
All right. Now, in this instance, now you discover that it affects the overall project, and even the project sponsor is aware in this instance. So again, you have to now, at the end of the day, you have to review your project plan after the force majeure. You have to update the plans again. Now, you have to still come back to the table with the project sponsor. Of course, is aware of the risk that has come up, and it has affected the whole project, the cost of materials. It has affected virtually even the schedule and all that. So there will still have to be meetings with all stakeholders and the project sponsor to still work out on, the risk management plan, the response and all that. So you're going to have meetings, definitely. You have to come together again. This time around, every stakeholder has to be involved. You understand? It's going to be a general shared risk. You're not only going to be the one sharing the risks at this time around. It's going to be shared amongst even the project sponsor, even the stakeholders involved, because they are all aware of the risks that came up during the project execution. All right. I don't know if you.
Okay. Okay. So, Mr. Abubakar, I guess you heard that. So, force majeure is not caused by the project team, and it's not caused by the owner of the contract, the owner of the project. But as project managers, we must do our best to encourage our project owners to ensure their projects. Okay, they should try as much as they can to ensure the project. Now, if the project is insured, it is the insurance company that will take care of the risk. But in the case where the risk was not insured, neither the project manager nor the project owner should be held responsible. But at the end of the day, anyway, the project owner will still be the one to finance the risks associated to that force majeure. So it's important, we as project managers, when we look at the delicateness of the environment, look at the delicateness of the project, then we should be able to advise appropriately. Okay, and that's why we as project managers, we are not just on the execution phase only. We are also seen as professionals providing expert judgment. So we should be able to provide advisory to the best of our ability. There's a question here from Jonathan Anderson. Please, Jonathan Anderson, you will answer that question yourself. I'm not even going to read it. Jonathan Anderson, you answer that particular question yourself. My own question was answered while Mr. Abraham was present. Okay. Okay, so Mr. Chiso is trying to lay more emphasis on what force majeure is. Okay, Abubakar say thank you so much. The response is succinct. Okay, so thank you so much. I think we have answered most of the questions. So I'm going to, Mr. Jonathan, don't ask us that question. No. Now open and when you finish asking the question, you now answer it. I am Mr. Jonathan Oya. On mute, let's hear from you.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm following the presentation.
Yes.
And what it means here is that if you have a number of risks,
yes,
and your risk management plan with your team, you've been able to mitigate or you've been able to do away with the risk.
Yeah.
But there are one or two of them you are not able to eliminate them or to do away with them.
Right.
With the risk sharing, we can also not share that risk, and you are not to also take it from the scope. Then what do you do? Are you to accept it and go with it and make contingencies plan for that, or what is it?
So, sorry, can you please go through that question one more time so that we can get clarity, please?
Okay, so the question is, during the risk management plan, we've identified, say, 236 risks.
Okay.
And out of these 236 risks, we've been able to manage 234 of them that we can control during the execution of the project. The two of them we think is beyond us, we cannot do anything about it. The next thing we thought about was to transfer this risk to a third party, which is also not possible because there's nobody ready to accept that. And then we were also thinking about taking it out of the scope, but we know taking it from the scope is also not possible. And from the practicality, then we said, okay, let's accept the risk. And you see, if you cannot transfer the risk, then you know the magnitude of the risk.
Yeah.
The risk is very high, such that people are not ready to accept the risk.
Yeah.
So we try to accept that risk by ourselves because we cannot do away with it, and create a contingency plan for that particular risk. Is that the approach?
Okay.
Okay. Well, you have actually answered the question. You remember I talked about residual risks. You may not be able to mitigate all the risks, but at least you should be able to mitigate the high priority risks.
That's right.
You understand? So when you're able to mitigate those risks, and you will still have some little risks left, so you have no choice but to accept those risks. You understand? So the approach with which you have followed is, I think, is the appropriate approach.
Okay, so for the risks that you have, the residual risk, please also note that like we've been saying, and like Mr. Chiso rightly said, he said in project management practice, we need to pay attention to risk management. Okay, we need to pay attention to risk management. Just like you've highlighted in this case, you have been able to identify 236, 234 or 32 had been taken care of, 4 we are remaining. And Mr. Abraham has pointed out the high priority risks should be our major concern. Now, the question is, these 4 that are remaining, are they high priority risks? Now, if they are high priority risks, then you must you must not carry out the project until you settle that risk. Because if we go back to safety management, there's what we call hazard analysis. You have to do a thorough project hazard analysis on those risks and find out their impact. Now, if it's a project that, or sorry, if it's a risk that the impact will be so disastrous, you don't go ahead until you have settled that risk. You can only accept the risk if the risk is as low as reasonably practicable. You can only accept the risk if the risks are as low as reasonably practicable. If the risks are as high as non-tolerable or non-acceptable, then you must do your best to find a way to deal with that risk before you continue the project. Or you can modify the project to eliminate or get the risk to an acceptance level. Okay, you can modify the project to get the risk to an acceptance level. But in risk management, there are so many ways we can play around risk to get to some levels of acceptance. Okay, but remember, the risk, if you must accept it, it mustn't be a high priority risk that will cause this much critical incidents during the project, where there could be loss of life, permanent disabilities and all of that, and maybe environmental damages that will be non-recoverable. So we have to pay attention to such things before we accept such risks. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. So the attendance list has been shared. And as we take the attendance, let's take the time to listen to this announcement. Now, I'm sure we are done with these questions and answers. Someone is asking, what are the available software tools in the industry, and are they avoidable? Sorry, Ola Okwa, Oye Lakin. This is your question. Is it that the software, are they avoidable, or is it that the risks, are they avoidable? I say REMIS is one of them. Okay, so we might not know all the project risk management tools, but we know that MS Project can be used in project risk identification and handling as well. Okay, so you can search through Google and find out all of the ones that could be available to your own industry. Okay. Okay, so the attendance list has been passed, but before we go on, can we please say a very big thank you to Mr. Abraham for this wonderful section this morning? Can we please say a very big thank you? It has been a wonderful section from 6:02 to 8:03. So can we say a very big thank you? Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We really appreciate this. Your lectures are always wonderful. So we are so privileged to have you teach us from your wealth of experience and all of that. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Wait, so Damilola Olani has been in this class, or he just breezing? Damilola, have you been in this class, or you just breezing?